So here's the bad news. You're not a genius. But here's the good news that follows the bad news is that there's genius inside of you, and your job starting right now is to find that genius and let it out.
You can have it.
World famous photographer Chase Jarvis.
It's Purecast, exactly the way I like it. In this episode of Chase Jarvis Raw, we talk about genius and that there's a genius inside of everybody. And I don't want to say that lightly. As is common with the Chase Jarvis Raw videos, I don't just come up with this stuff myself. I reach out to who I think is the world's top experts in this stuff. And I've done that today with Meade. Michael is the author of the book, The Genius Myth. He is an expert in the field, a very close friend of my good friend. We've just been acquainted, and I feel like it's a huge honor to have him on the show, because what you're gonna learn today is you're gonna learn three things, like all good Chase Jarvis Raw videos. The first thing is, what is genius? The second thing is, how do you find that inside of you? And the third thing is, what are some common blockers that get in the way of you living that genius life that is inside of you? So, Michael, thank you very much for coming here all the way to San Francisco.
Great to be here.
So, I promised the people three things. First, talk about genius, because as you know, we just launched the 30 Days of Genius series here at Creative Live, and it's a series where we sit down with the world's top creatives and entrepreneurs and thought leaders, and these are big names, household names that people know, and it's been an incredible, inspiring series. But I'm really sensitive that we don't put those people up on a hill and sit down here and wonder that we'll never be that, or how do we avoid from idolizing that and recognizing that it's inside of us. In order to do that, we need to know what is genius, because we've got it all wrong, I think.
Well, the only way to recognize it in people who excel at something is because we have the seed of it in ourselves. So when a person is born, the spirit for life is already there. And that spirit for life used to be called the genius of the person. And then when you really look at it, it's not a simple talent, because many people have talent, they don't all even use it. So the genius of a person is a combination of the gifts they have to give, the talents they might bear, the style in which they live it, and the uniqueness of their very deep self. Those are the combined things that make the genius of a person.
Why? I love that definition. There's clearly a genius inside of every person. Yeah. Why have we idolized the other and gotten away from that? The genius is in every person.
Well, there's a psychological process where we project our genius onto someone else just to see it. But we're eventually supposed to take it back and then empower ourselves. We have to see it outside. It's very hard to trust oneself, so we have to see it outside. But in the Western world, something strange has happened where people have decided only some people have genius. And that's very unfortunate right now, because right now the world needs everybody's genius.
Like, this is the question that I get asked, maybe more than any other, but how do I know my true calling? How do I know what I'm supposed to do? What's my personal style? How do I know those things?
It's a tricky thing. The calling is calling to the genius that's already there. That's what the calling is about. The calling isn't what's out there. It's calling to something in here that needs to awaken. The problem is it has its own language, and it has its own way of awakening. And so the hardest thing is to trust oneself, and that's the only way to find one's genius. So the old idea was that the genius has its own language. In my case, it was the language of myth. I'm growing up on the streets in New York, and I get taken by myth, and I'm trying to talk myth to everybody, and everybody thinks I'm crazy. It took me 20 years to understand that I was a storyteller and a mythologist, and that's what my life was about, but I knew it on my 13th birthday. And so...
How long did it take you to realize that that was your calling?
It really took 20 years before I realized, no, I'm here to do this, and I'm going to do this no matter what. And that's what happens when it fully awakens.
I feel like so many people, the internet is an amazing thing. We can find access to so much information. But what it does is there's a little bit of a disconnect, because you see so many people who are risen and are realizing they're in their genius, and there's this sort of a separation between the folks who haven't yet discovered their sort of true calling and those that it's great in that you can see the genius in so many other people, and you realize that there's a distance that you have to cover between where you are now. and where you need or want to be, where your genius is. But what advice would you give to someone who's still struggling?
Well, first thing I think may be that by the age of 20, everybody has at least one experience of the awakening of their genius. That's a rule on earth, near as I can tell. The problem is, it's hard to understand what it was. One's parents typically don't agree with that direction in life.
Yeah.
One's friends may not be reinforcing it. So
School certainly doesn't.
school, everybody's on the same curriculum. That's anti-genius, right? Two levels of education. One is everybody needs to know how to be a citizen or a community person. Second level, everybody needs help at awakening their genius and supporting it. As soon as school starts going to the second level, this whole thing will work better. So the trick is learning that language, and often we just don't listen carefully enough. But here's another thing I found. Genius is discovered during adversity.
Okay.
Carl Jung said, genius hides behind the wound. There's an old saying that during adversity, genius is revealed. During comfort, it is concealed. So a person can go to any time they were in big trouble and start to examine how did they survive. Whatever way they survived, there's some genius in that method.
Ooh.
That's one way to do it.
I'm telling myself my own story right now. And my path to becoming a photographer and entrepreneur was so circuitous, all over the place. I told you I dropped out of a path toward professional soccer, bailed on medical school, dropped out of a PhD in philosophy to become a photographer. That was so incongruent with everyone else's plan for me.
Right.
But I always knew I was actually suppressing all of that sort of creative energy throughout the time of being sort of a jock in high school, because I was looking around at self-preservation.
Yeah.
And that path to me was long and painful, but I knew it was there when I was young, when I'd pick up a camera, when I would explore as an only child in the backyard, building things, and yet are there some keys beyond just the trauma or hiding behind the wound or when we were under duress, like things that brought us joy or pleasure or great surprise and delight as a kid? Like what should folks don't be looking for?
Two big doorways.
Okay.
One is, I love it, I love it, I love it. I'm going through this door, even if I have to sneak through, if I have to cheat, I'm going through this door. That's the one door. The other door is, I'm in trouble, I'm wounded, I'm in danger, and the genius is behind both doors. And so a person just has to know their own life. So genius and the difficulty of life live in proximity.
How important is the word intuition? I use that a lot as a really sort of calloused, simple way of talking about that inner voice. But to me, that is actually genius. And so is that a right way of thinking about it, or is it wrong?
It's a good way to think about it, but there are people whose genius is body oriented, and they may not be intuitive at all.
Yeah.
Like the kid who starts playing soccer and can do that flip over your head and kick the ball thing. I mean, that's genius stuff. Now, it doesn't mean they have to be a great soccer player. That's a complete modern misunderstanding. What it means is they have to follow their bodily intelligence, and they may wind up being a really good massage therapist. The body has its language. So the first thing is to understand what language is talking to me. For me, it was stories. It was, narrative.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that could be an entire vocation.
And it didn't work from the streets of New York in a gang as you were when you were young?
Well, it did, but it wasn't identified. So I wasn't the biggest kid or the toughest kid, but I could out-talk anybody. and everybody recognized it, but no one called it genius, and I certainly didn't until I started to realize that attraction to language, which saved my life many times, was in fact connected to the genius.
There is, I think, the thing that is unnameable that you know about yourself. Don't let the fact that it's unnameable hide that genius. To me, that's because I didn't know what to call my personal gift of creativity or.
Yeah. Well, I call it the uniqueness, and that's the problem. There is no system for revealing it because it is unique, and the path to it may be unique. That's the beauty of it, and that's why it eludes systematic thought.
So if you haven't found yours yet, do not wait, or do not worry. the genius keeps calling,
Keeps
but you
calling.
have to also keep looking. All right, so that's thing 2. That's how to sort of find or discover the genius inside of you. Now, thing 3 is also a big, like, I'm looking for actionable takeaways for people at home. And what's really clear to me is that there are so many blockers out there. What are some techniques that people can use to overcome those hurdles and find their genius?
You already referred to it in your own story. We're not going to be satisfied until we tap into that genius. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it makes living beautiful, and it gives sense to that individual life. And so I was told when I was growing up, well, if you want to be creative, then you won't have any money and whatever, you know, but you need a career.
So true.
Yeah,
So many people were told that.
it's just not true. It's not one or the other, it's both. So they used to call it the first arc of life, which we now say, get a life. You know, achieve something, ground yourself in the world. That's the first arc. The second arc of life is find your genius and begin to work that path. So for me, when I started having children and you have to get up early and all that, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I had 2 to 3 hours before anyone else was awake, so that I could be spending that time, in my case, studying myth and this kind of thing, learning how to write. But a person has to commit to something. Make it what you love, see where it goes, and don't believe that you can't. I mean, what I'm interested in now, the world and the condition it's in, nature rattling, culture unraveling, everybody's genius is needed. There doesn't need to be a big heroic idea. There is no one idea that's going to come along. No system's going to fix all this, but a whole bunch of people saying, I'm going this way, and you follow that genius, and one day you hit an intersection where suddenly you have something to give. And I want to mention a subtle thing. Some people have the genius of compassion. It's very hard to recognize in an extroverted culture like America,
Yeah.
but it's really essential. So sometimes people have the wrong idea. They think the genius means I'm talented in some overt way, but some people have that subtlety of how to relate to people on a deep level. Some people have a genius for compassion and bringing people together. It's all kinds of strange things, and most people are really close to it and just don't know it.
Well, you mentioned writing, so I'll leave everybody at home with your new book, The Genius Myth, by Michael Meade. It's an incredible book. Congratulations. Wrote this book in 3 months, an intense 12 hours a day, right? I love, we create in the same way, my friend. I love this.
Well, that's what the genius does. It makes you do things that other people say you can't do that. No, that's how the genius works.
Well, you're listening to Your Genius. Thank you so much for helping everyone in my community understand a little bit more about how we all have our own calling. And it's really important for me to connect with you guys at home around 30 Days of Genius. It's an amazing program, creativelive.com/genius. Those folks are meant to be sort of inspirations to you, and you get to see a little bit of yourself in each of them. So take that inspiration and apply it to your own life. There's a genius inside of every person. Michael Meade, thank you so
Right,
much.
well, thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And we're going to do another one of these videos, I don't know, another couple days. I'll see you next time, folks.
You can have it if you want it. It's gratis, it's for free. There ain't no strings attached, no, there ain't no catch. Take my love, take me.